a tricky balancing act. The US Federal Reserve is to decide on interest rates, torn between tackling inflation and stabilising the banks. Meanwhile, the Bank of England also has its work cut out, with a surprise increase in the UK inflation rate at over 10%. And later in the programme, you won't believe what one Kenyan farmer is using to keep his energy bills down. Here are some clues. Welcome to World Business Report. I'm Mark Lobel. Central banks have their work cut out this week. In the UK, in the latest inflation data, it shows an unexpected jump to 10.4% following 3 months of slowing, with food inflation at its highest level for over 45 years. This will put pressure on the Bank of England to raise interest rates on Thursday, despite the impact this could have on the health of the banking system. Over in the US, the Federal Reserve is also caught between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, inflation is running high, but on the other, well, the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and difficulties elsewhere. There is pressure to lower rates in a few hours' time to restore financial stability to the banking sector. Here's Michelle Fleury in Washington.
Until recently, Silicon Valley Bank was a little-known lender in California until it failed. Credit Suisse was one of the most well-known banks in Europe until it was undone. Both were brought down by panic running through the financial system. To ease fears, US Treasury Secretary told a banking conference the government was ready to help if needed.
Our intervention was necessary to protect the broader US banking system. And similar actions could be warranted if smaller institutions suffered deposit runs that pose the risk of contagion.
Now all eyes are on how those inside here, America's central bank, will react. Their fight against inflation has become a lot more complicated. The majority of economists now expect the Federal Reserve to raise rates by a quarter point to 4.75%. Nobody is entirely sure what America's central bank will do next. That's because fighting inflation by raising interest rates and stabilising the financial sector are at odds, which makes what Fed Chair Jerome Powell says after the decision even more important than usual. Michelle Fleury, BBC News, Washington, D.C.
Well, let's talk more about this with Paul Dales, Chief UK Economist at Capital Economics. Paul, are Janet Yellen's words of reassurance enough, or will the Fed have to hold back on raising rates and risk being accused of ignoring inflation?
It's a really tricky situation, which I think, in my view, usually leads to compromises. So if the banking system hadn't been vulnerable over the last few weeks, then I suspect the Federal Reserve would be contemplating raising interest rates by 50 basis points or 0.5%. So I think the compromise here is to raise interest rates by 25 basis points or 0.25%. And that signals that you're not going soft on inflation, but equally you are somewhat concerned about the banking system.
How do you think that decision by the Fed, whatever it will be, will affect the Bank of England's decision a few hours later to raise interest rates after that surprise and unexpected rise in inflation here in the UK?
Well, I don't think it will have a direct influence, but the Bank of England is thinking about the very same issues that the Federal Reserve is faced with. Perhaps the one difference here is that the issues in the global banking system have so far been confined to some bank failures in the US and in Switzerland. So the UK so far hasn't had its own troubles. That doesn't mean that the issues aren't relevant for the UK, but it perhaps means that the Bank of England doesn't need to be quite so worried about the banking system as the Fed. So I think the Bank of England will actually raise interest rates by 25 basis points because I think it's too soon to declare that the war on inflation has been won.
But if we do see rate rises on both sides of the pond, do you think we're more likely to see more of the unexpected, more bank failures?
It's certainly possible, and I wouldn't rule anything out when it comes to the banking system. So we know that the failure of Silicon Valley Bank was directly linked to the influence of higher interest rates, which led to large losses on its assets. although it must be worth saying that it was very surprising that that bank did not hedge its interest rate risk like most other banks do. So higher interest rates certainly put stress on the banking system, but they are also necessary in order to solve the inflation problem, which is hurting people in the UK right now as they're having to pay for food prices that are 18% higher than they were a year ago. There's no easy win here. With economics, it's always trade-offs, and it's a juggle between how worried are you about the banking system and how worried are you about inflation. At the moment, I think the central banks will want to focus a bit more on inflation, and that will give them a bit more breathing room later in the year to perhaps call a halt on the interest rate hikes.
All right, Paul Dales from Capital Economics. Thank you very much for joining us here on World Business Report. Now, this next story is fast becoming a viewer's favourite. It's a simple one, but ingenious. As we all know, the cost of living crisis is hitting the majority of us in the pocket. Well, here is one of the most creative methods to make ends meet you're ever likely to see. Kenyan farmer Anthony Mugai is using chicken poo to run his farm, taking the energy it provides to cook food and fuel his car. Let's have a look.
Hi, my name is Anthony. I'm a farmer. I use chicken poop to power my farm. We collect this chicken poo every morning. We just sweep it, put it here. That's clean for the day. So now we go and feed the biogas. We are mixing this chicken poop with water just to make it flow easily in the biogas. So here is our biogas. You pour it in. This is the inlet. The outlet is on the other side. With biogas, the biggest cost is the initial outlay. But running it, I would say it's cost almost nothing. The initial outlay was approximately $900. Biogas flows through that pipe, comes into these gadgets to remove any sulfurs and those bad smells. This is now hot water. This biogas, we heat the water for the fish pond, but this is the same thing that you can use for shower in the morning. Now I need to show you how biogas powers my house. Come with me. This gas we use to cook literally everything. I don't need to worry about running out of gas, or I don't have money to buy gas, as long as my chicken keep on pooing. If you look at the kind of farming our farmers are doing currently, the returns are minimal. So the only thing that can make sense is recognizing that you don't only get meat from chicken. Now it's time to power my car with biogas. This pipe brings biogas from the biogas plant, and this one is taking biogas inside the generator. So I connect the charger, and we are ready to go. Who'd have thought chicken poo could power a car? It's amazing. Goodbye.
Cracking story. Now, just time for another story. The IMF has announced a financing arrangement for Ukraine worth $15.6 billion over the next 4 years. The loan offer, yet to be ratified, is to help support Ukraine's recovery after the devastation of the Russian invasion. The arrangement includes an assumption that Ukraine works towards joining the European Union. Let's have a look at the markets now. After a 2-day bounce, European stocks have been petering out on Wednesday as investors await that Fed decision, and as you can see, the FTSE 100 index opening lower after hotter than expected inflation and rate sensitive real estate stocks. Let's have a look at Asia. Price of Brent crude down 0.27% there. Asia up after a public holiday, big bounce there as they await the Fed decision, and really that's where all eyes are on, awaiting that Fed decision. Will they or won't they raise rates in a few days' time? That's all your business headlines for now around the world. You are up to date. Do join us soon for more. Thanks for your company.
You're watching BBC News.